Hello, I'm Gaia Vince and welcome to my home museum. Today's object is a nagging dictator, a wrist-worn memento mori, a time marker. It's a watch. Humans are superlative mental time travellers. We're able to relive past episodes, even ones that we never experienced, and to project ourselves forward to imagined futures. As far as we know, we are the only animals to understand that sex leads to the birth of babies, that an activity that we do today will have consequences 9 months later. And so we can therefore also trace our kinship and so broaden our important social networks. And humans also know their mortality, that we will one day die. And it's perhaps this ability to sense time passing irretrievably and our knowledge of lives lived before and after us that gives humans this desire for purpose in our lives, the long-term motivations that help shape our cultural evolution. Our time mastery also gives us our history and the perspective that comes with understanding long-term cultural and environmental change. We're able to understand our lives and our cultural tools and practices in this rich context. So we have more meaningful collective cultural knowledge to draw on. But our experience of time is actively created by the mind, by our memories and emotions, and the idea that time is out there somewhere connected to space. This mind time, our internal sensation of time, central to our experience of reality. So for most of us, time passes as a flow, like a river. So behind us are the certain events that have occurred, and in front of us are those nebulous events of the future. But all sorts of things from fear to age, isolation, body temperature, rejection, these can all affect our perception of how fast time flows. So we need to calibrate our mind time with objective real time in order to make sense of the world and our place in it. So our concept of time evolved to help organise us and organise our societies. It was the Romans who were the first culture to really have their lives meted out by time in a way that we would recognise in the industrial West. They had sundials, and sundials have become sophisticated and were everywhere in public spaces, and they were even privately owned. In fact, by the 1st century BC, the Roman architect Vitruvius could list 13 different types of sundials. And this was nearly 2 centuries after the playwright Plautus had cursed, "Confound him who set up a sundial in this place to cut and hack my days so wretchedly into small portions." However, sundials meant that the length of an hour varied with the seasons, because daylight began at dawn and ended at dusk. Timekeeping wouldn't become divorced from the motions of the heavens until the 14th century. And this happened with the invention of the escapement mechanism, and this was a device to regulate the rotation of a wheel pulled by a falling weight. And a wheel like this could operate a gear mechanism, and that could strike a bell on the hour. And so the word clock actually comes from the French for bell. And the tick-tock of the clock's escapement would become the voice of time. In fact, it would become the voice of time well into my lifetime. Mechanical clocks meant that the length of an hour, no longer measured against a sundial, remained constant with the seasons. So technology had evolved to keep society in sync with objectively measurable rhythms, with the objectively measurable rhythm of the cosmos. But whereas in our deep past, timekeeping had a survival benefit, alerting us to food availability with the changing seasons, for instance, now it was overwhelmingly driven by subjective social norms. So with the construction of these monumental public clocks in every square in Europe, time started to become a valuable commodity. People could hear it passing, and the more accurately they marked time, the more dominion they gave it over them. And this new kind of quantitative cultural evolution in our approach to time also extended to other areas too. So, for instance, there was new precision in weights and measures, in monetary standards, double entry bookkeeping, perspective in paintings, and polyphonic music. Our attitude to the world had changed in Western Europe, and we began to perceive and classify things numerically. And wasting time began to be seen not just as foolish, but also as sinful. So time mastery grew out of larger complex societies, but it also made such societies possible because it eased trade and lowered the costs, the energy costs of our interactions and activities, because it removed uncertainty, that wasted time. And as states became more complex, time increasingly dominated all aspects of life. People started to clock on and off. Time became money, not passed but spent. And the regimented diktat of clocks dramatically altered human lifestyles. Knowing the time became essential, and what time it was no longer had much to do with nature's cycles. Our move to disassociate cultural time from biological time, well, it's flooded homes and cities with artificial lights, completing our divorce from the dawn and dusk cycles of the natural world, and confusing animals and plants into untimely dawn choruses or unseasonal flowering. The result is a mismatch between the clocks in our cells and our cultural interpretation of the atomic time beamed by satellites to our smartphones. So we work late in the evenings and rise early in darkness, and we live, most of us, in perpetual jet lag. But the irony is, for all of our new expertise with time, we nonetheless find it as difficult as ever to plan for humanity's future, even to imagine a world in which we are dead. And this is perhaps a cognitive failure of our biology. It's certainly a cultural failing too.